know I'm a Gemini. I love hard and I fight harder. A born author.
If you were to take these particular lyrics at face value out of context, they sound like they could have been written into Drake's beef, by definition alone, is a singular one. Two artists that for the last 15 or so years have represented wildly different sensibilities, attitudes, styles, priorities, and approaches to music. The other two biggest beefs in hip-hop history involved some of the most influential artists of the last 30 years, Big versus Pac, and Jay versus Nas, of course. Intense rivalries, with the consensus being that the eventual deaths of both Big and Pac are inherently tied to the escalating tension between the East and West Coast in the mid to late 90s. But nobody ever really questioned the integrity or authenticity of any of these guys, which is what makes this age no longer confined to regions, cities, or even the genre itself. Kendrick and Drake are both well into their careers as global superstars that transcend the medium of hip-hop. And that's why it matters, regardless of whether you think this beef has been petty or ugly, wildly entertaining. As the dust is settling, I am recording this video just after Kendrick Lamar's pop-out concert. We're going to run through the entirety of his and Drake's relationship with each other throughout the years, and how exactly we got to a point where, right now, a song alleging that one of the biggest artists in the world should be in jail as a registered sex offender is the biggest song in the world. And before I start this, yes, Kendrick Lamar won. I'm going to say it off the bat by a landslide. If you disagree, feel free to shout off in the comments. And also, J. Cole is here somewhere. So if you take it way back to the times of Two Dope Boys and datpiff.com in the early 2010s, Drake had already broken out with So Far Gone and Thank Me Later, while Kendrick was on the precipice of something special. Now, in retrospect, a lot of people attribute Kendrick's exposure or blow up in rap to his Drake co-sign with his Buried Alive feature on Take Care, as well as taking him on tour in 2012 in the run-up to Good Kid, Mad City. And whilst I myself will admit that the very first time I ever heard Kendrick Lamar's voice was on Take Care, I was also 14 years old and still developing my music sensibilities and tastes. In reality, Kendrick had been ceremonially handed the torch of the West Coast in summer of 2011 by the likes of Snoop Dogg and The Game and Warren G. And true to his word, that dude has been running with that torch ever since. Rightfully so, of course. Drake had recognized that Kendrick might be the next big thing and had something special. Kendrick, alongside A$AP Rocky, joined Drake on his Club Paradise tour, a tour that would ultimately end with two more collaborations between Kendrick and Drake in the shape of Poetic Justice and Fucking Problems. Kendrick released Take Care in late 2011, a far superior album in every way than his debut Thank Me Later, characterized by moody, low-key, murky beats partnered with introspective and reflective lyrics mostly revolving around Drake's rise to fame. The feature list alone is insane, especially with what some of these artists have gone on to do. Rihanna, The Weeknd, Lil Wayne, Andre 3000, Nicki Minaj, and of course Kendrick Lamar himself. This is the album where a lot of Drake fans, and I would include myself in this camp, felt that Drake had found his voice and his bag. Kendrick, meanwhile, followed up his independently released Section 80 with Good Kid, Mad City in October of 2012, and universally. To this day, the album still remains on the Billboard 200, having spent 600 consecutive weeks on the chart. It's rightfully stood the test of time as, in my opinion, one of the best albums ever made, regardless of genre. Good Kid, Mad City had sent Kendrick Lamar into another stratosphere of fame and adoration almost overnight. With one album, there were already murmurs that Kendrick may be on his way to being one of the best to ever do it. If you had asked any rap fan in 2012 or 2013 if Kendrick Lamar and Drake would work together again, most would have bet their house on it. But then came one verse in August of 2013 that changed everything and proved to be the beginning of a 10-year Cold War between the artists that only just went nuclear.
Miscellaneous minds, never explaining the minds. Devilish grin for my alias.
You cannot discuss Kendrick and Drake's beef without Control. It's the inciting incident of all of the tension between the two. In August of 2013, Big Sean drops Control featuring Jay Electronica and Kendrick. And the fact that most people forget Jay Electronica was ever on the song to begin with is a testament to how powerful Kendrick's verse was. In an attempt to restoke the fires of competition in hip-hop, which is something Kendrick clearly sees as a necessary aspect of the art, he directly called out 11 of the most popular rappers of the time directly by name saying he's got love for them, but he's trying to murder them.
But this is hip hop, and them niggas should know what time it is. And that goes for Jamaica, Big Crit Wale, Pusha T, Meek Mills, A$AP Rocky, Drake, Big Sean, J Electron, Tyler McMillan. I got love for you all, but I'm trying to murder you niggas.
This sparked response tracks galore, some from mentioned artists and some who were seemingly offended that they didn't even get a mention. Hip-hop veterans like Jadakiss and Styles P echoed Kendrick's sentiments about the competitive nature and spirit of hip-hop. Later down the line, Nicki Minaj didn't take too lightly to Kendrick declaring himself the king of New York.
Did you feel away when Kendrick didn't mention your name in that Control verse?
Probably in the top 5 because he did mention. So I'm the queen of New York. I'm the king of New York.
Word.
Let me tell you why.
Talk that talk.
Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why.
With Drake also being on the Young Money roster like Nicki, they did share similar attitudes. Drake was interviewed by Billboard a couple of weeks after the verse had dropped. In seemingly contradictory fashion, Drake had claimed that the verse didn't upset him, however went on record to say that Kendrick is not murdering me at all in any platform. Things get a bit murkier when Drake said he bumped into Kendrick after the VMAs and it was all love. He also said that he'd lost respect for the sentiment of the verse because Kendrick Lamar was friendly and civil with him at the VMAs. Drake did attempt to downplay the power and impact of the verse by calling it a moment to talk about in another interview with Elliot Wilson and implied that it was forgettable.
And he's doing his thing really well. And that verse was... he's giving people like moments, you know, like that verse was a moment to talk about. Are you listening to it now at this point in time? Okay. And then it was real cool for like, you know, a couple weeks. But like, if I asked you, for example, like, how does that verse start?
He goes on to say that he's more worried about consistency and bodies of work than competition.
Where is Drake at with Control?
I'm probably like as done as like the rest of the world is with that record. Like I think it came and it went, you know what I mean? And not to discredit it, like it was a good moment, but at the end of the day, it's just like, it was like one of those sort of like fleeting like Twitter frenzies that like, it was cool for what it was, you know, and I'm just into making like, my thing is like, I like lasting power, you know, that's my thing. I want you to still be listening to this album in the summer or, you know, next year. I want this to stay in your car, stay on your mind.
Which in hindsight is kind of hilarious considering the consistency of Kendrick Lamar's unparalleled album catalog and its longevity. The implication at the end of this interview is that Drake's only real competition is Kanye West.
When it comes to competition, I'm more worried about consistency. I'm more worried about bodies of work. I'm basically talking about like, you know, there's one guy who's up every night thinking about how to get better and how to do things bigger. And, you know, that's Kanye West. He's like, and
we all know how that ended up. Drake seemed to be taking it the most personal out of everyone who was mentioned. Pusha T, for example, clearly wasn't fazed. He even had Kendrick Lamar feature on his debut album shortly after with Nostalgia. Late 2013, post-Control begun the long-running sequence of subliminals that culminated in the insanity of 2024. In retrospect now, people are coming up with more and more Drake and Kendrick bars from the last decade that are being reimagined as disses. However, I'm only going to go through the ones that have some semblance of validity, relevance, or notability. The Language is the first notable post-Control sub that started to fly around. Drake opens up the song by saying,
I don't know why they been lying, but your shit is not that inspiring.
Seemingly doubling down on what he said in interviews that Kendrick just had a moment and that he's not real competition. Kendrick appears to respond very quickly after Nothing Was the Same.
Yeah, and nothing been the same since they dropped Control and took the sense of the rapper back in his pajama clothes. Ha ha, joke's on you, high five.
Amidst an aggressive and fiery verse, Kendrick would later claim that this bar was not about Drake, but I personally find that very hard to believe. A couple of years down the line, in 2015, Drake had entered a very public beef with Meek Mill, who was claiming that Drake was using ghostwriters for his raps. The public consensus was that Drake won the beef with his infamous back-to-back drops, but the issue of Drake's ghostwriters has been a long-running joke ever since in the hip-hop community. Now, if you know anything about hip-hop, not writing your own raps is a big no-no. Of course, there is a history of rappers writing raps for other artists. It's common knowledge, for example, that Jay-Z wrote Still DRE, Kendrick has written for Dr. Dre, Drake himself has written for Kanye West. The difference is that within hip-hop circles, artists like Dr. Dre and Kanye West were primarily viewed as producers first rather than pure MCs. So that allegation against Drake is a much more significant one. At the same time of this Meek Mill and Drake beef in 2015, Kendrick Lamar had dropped To Pimp a Butterfly, once again regarded as one of the best albums ever made, and it was setting records up against Michael Jackson for Grammy nominations. On King Kunta, one of To Pimp a Butterfly's singles, Kendrick raps, seemingly alluding to the rumors that Drake wasn't writing his raps. That same year in 2015 on the Game's 100 track, the Game himself being a Compton native like Kendrick Lamar, Drake rapped that he'd have
all of your fans if I didn't go poppin', I stayed on some conscious shit. I would have so many more friends if I lost my success and my confidence.
Now to me, personally, collabing with a Compton artist, filming a music video in Compton and writing these bars does feel like an attempt at a taunt or a bait towards Kendrick. After this, even the sneak disses were few and far between, with the next most significant moment coming with the Heart Part 4 in 2017 in the run-up to Damn. At the time of its release, people were speculating heavily as to who Kendrick was talking about, with the main contenders being either Drake or Big Sean. In retrospect, it does seem directed at Drake. Kendrick raps, and of course, if you've heard Euphoria, those bars take on an entirely new world of meaning. The Heart Part 4 appears as a response or a warning shot to anyone who claims that they want Kendrick's smoke, with him asserting in the bluntest of terms,
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I am the greatest rapper alive.
Alongside differentiating between accomplishments and astonishments. After this, everything seemed to die down on the sneak disses front, but there is one significant, maybe the most significant prelude to 2024's All Out War that changed the rules of rap beef forever. Now, alongside a string of Kendrick sneak disses, Drake had been in a long-standing beef with rap legend Pusha T, who has, of course, a close affiliation with Kanye West. Pusha T, like Meek Mill, was also claiming that Drake wasn't writing his raps, which is what effectively started their beef. Now, I know we could take it back all the way to 2002 with the whole Birdman Clips Pharrell issue, but that could probably warrant its own video on its own. By 2016, Drake was calling into question Pusha T's street cred on Two Birds, One Stone, pitting him as a performative gangster.
But really it's you with all the drug dealer stories, it's gotta stop though. You made a couple chops and now you think you Chapo.
In 2018, on the Kanye West produced Infrared from Daytona, Pusha T once again claimed that Drake didn't write his raps.
It was
Whilst it was scathing and aggressive from Pusha, he was even name-dropping Drake's supposed ghostwriter Quentin Miller. Everything was still confined to the music/rap arena. That changed a few hours later with Drake's release of Duppy Freestyle, something that would change the course of rap beef history forever. The song itself is actually quite good. Drake is in good form. He has some clever bars about some of the songs he penned with Kanye West and an amazing beat. It was a pretty strong response with bars like, "You're not even top 5 as far as your label talent goes." However, a seemingly innocuous bar proved to be Drake's downfall.
I told you keep playing with my name and I'ma let it ring on you like Virginia Williams. I'm too resilient.
He mentions by name Pusha T's long-term partner Virginia Williams, not in a particularly malicious or clever way, but in a clear attempt to taunt Pusha T. Pusha T himself said that the bar was whack.
You know, when I heard, like, again, when I heard the Duppy freestyle, I was like, okay, you know, now I have to like really analyze who this person is. And I gotta analyze, like, you know, just questions like, man, okay, why would you put her in it, my fiance?
Yes, sir.
Okay, what was, like, the line was trash, right? It was a line about like, I'm gonna make it ring on you like Virginia Williams. The line itself is trash.
This was all Pusha T clearly needed to go full-on supervillain on Drake with the story of Adidon a few days later. Pusha T dissects Drake's racial insecurities, his daddy abandonment issues. He taunts 40, who is Drake's main producer, with his multiple sclerosis diagnosis, and provided one of the biggest bombshells in recent music history by outing the fact that Drake was actively hiding his son.
A baby's involved, it's deeper than rap. We talking character, let me keep with the facts. You are hiding a child, let that boy come home. Deadbeat motherfucker playing border patrol. Ooh!
Not only was he hiding a son, but he was intending to introduce said son to the world via a strategic Adidas campaign. Pusha T blew all of those plans up in about 3.5 minutes, and 6 years later, Drake appears more active in his son's life and has never directly responded to Pusha T on record. At the end of 2019, in an interview with Rap Radar, Drake addressed the beef with Pusha T and implied that there were rules to battle rap and Pusha T had taken it too far.
I'm just not really with that. And when I did say, oh, there's rules to this, I didn't mean there's rules that anybody has to follow. But in battle rap, they just headshotted that guy the other day because he was on stage and he pulled out a picture of the guy's dead aunt and started rapping about, that type of shit. And it just is what it is. There's a point where you're gonna want to stop rapping.
Pusha T clearly does not agree.
What I think is where they think that you went too far.
I don't care.
I
don't care.
Oh.
There is no too far. I don't play like that. That's why you don't play with me.
Right.
That's why you don't play with me.
Now, in the run-up to his 2024 war with Kendrick, the allegations he had made against him would have probably forced most rappers to give up. But he failed to realize that Kendrick Lamar, like Pusha T, is not most rappers. The telling point of this Rap Radar interview is Drake claiming that nobody cares about this guy in reference to Pusha T.
Yeah, I just realized that nobody cares about this guy. So it's not really much I can say better than Drake has a baby. He won.
Now, it is self-evident that Drake is far, far more popular than Pusha T is and probably will ever be. But to anyone who cares about rap, Pusha T is a certified legend, whether as part of clips or in his own right. To claim that nobody cares about Pusha T is code for numbers means everything. It would be on par with saying nobody cares about MF Doom, which would be ridiculous. The difference is, and it's a difference that Drake either underestimated or just didn't notice, is that with Kendrick, he has that credibility within rap niche circles like Pusha T, on top of huge commercial appeal that can go toe-to-toe with Drake. Artists like that are extremely rare. The only artists I can think of that have that balance of rap niche, close circles respect and commercial appeal is Jay-Z and Outkast. He makes the claim that once family members or children are rapped about, you're not going to want to respond. A claim he fully contradicts with his 2024 releases, but I am getting ahead of myself just there. For 5 years between 2017 and 2022, Kendrick Lamar did not release a solo studio album and we hardly heard anything from him. Now, it may sound like a tangent going on about this album, but I don't think the events of 2024 play out without its existence. Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers is by far, and it's not even close, Kendrick's most personal album ever. In concept, it sees him working through therapy, shedding the savior complex he'd burdened himself with, and ultimately choosing a quiet family life as opposed to changing the world. The album is not an easy listen, but it is endlessly rewarding. Kendrick admits to infidelity during the Good Kid, Mad City tour, and makes it a point not to find an excuse, but a reason someone may do this. Mr. Morale is an album about generational trauma and breaking that cycle, setting yourself free through honesty and admission that sometimes we're just not good people and we must recognize that before attempting to move forward and heal. The content of the album is confessional in nature, and it's these confessions that mean Drake's later choice of attack on Kendrick completely falls flat. This is the point in Kendrick's career we find him in just before the beef erupts. He's on tour with Baby Keem, he's dropping fun, silly songs like The Hillbillies to tide us over. Then, later in 2023, Drake links up with Mr. Jermaine Cole on a seemingly fun track, not knowing that this is the Franz Ferdinand assassination of this war. I'm not gonna lie, I thought For All the Dogs was a pretty mediocre album with some standout tracks here and there. However, Drake and J. Cole linking up brought out The Child in Me. These are two guys whose music I grew up on in the early 2010s, so it was a personal nostalgic moment. First Person Shooter is a pretty decent banger. Cole and Drake trade bars, they have good chemistry. Little did Cole know that his positive affirmations would have grave repercussions. Cole simply said,
"Love when they argue the hardest MC. Is it K-Dot, is it Aubrey or me? We the big three like we started a league, but right now I feel like Muhammad Ali."
Continuing the long-running consensus online that Drake, Kendrick, and Cole are the big three of modern hip-hop. Whilst I have personally never subscribed to that theory, not because of Drake or J. Cole's terrible shortcomings, but because I've always thought Kendrick is just in a league of his own. If I compare it to sports, for example, it's like comparing any current footballer to Lionel Messi. I do, however, think it is crazy that we've simultaneously had three hip-hop acts consistently dominate the charts and radio for this long. It's good fighting talk from J. Cole. He's in the big three, but he feels like Muhammad Ali. No pun intended, a friendly jab. It's kind of like, I fuck with you guys, but I fuck with me harder. And that was the end of it. Everyone thought that was the end of it until March of 2024. Metro Boomin and Future are two pioneers in their own right. Metro Boomin is a certified hit maker. He's worked with the likes of Young Thug, Gunna, Kanye West, and even fucking Spider-Man himself. There is an extremely strong argument that Future is the most influential rapper of the last 10 to 15 years. Atlanta has been one of, if not the most important hip-hop cities for that period, and Future is the de facto face of that. Without Future, there's no Playboi Carti, there's no Lil Baby, there's no Migos, there's no Gunna, and maybe at a push, there might not even be a Young Thug. The fact alone that these are two artists that Drake has worked extensively before is already a statement. Kendrick has also previously worked with Future and Metro Boomin. He hopped on the Mask Off remix in 2017 and had Future contribute to his 2018 Black Panther soundtrack. The Kendrick feature, like the rest of the features on We Don't Trust You, was initially hidden, making it a surprise, perhaps some indication of the impact his appearance would have. Like That is by far the most blatant Drake, and to an extent J. Cole, diss that Kendrick has spat since Control, only this time it is targeted. He flat out rejects the claim that the big three exists, declaring,
"Think I won't drop the location, I still got PTSD, motherfuck the big three, nigga, it's just big me, nigga, boom."
The beat as well cannot be described as anything else but pure hip hop. Chopped samples, Metro going crazy on an MPC, and Kendrick Lamar fully fired up. Of course, the standout lines and bars are the fuck the big three, all your dogs are getting buried, etc. But in hindsight, there are far more telling bars to me. Kendrick says,
"I hold them sentiments symbolic, oh, my temperament bipolar, I choose violence."
Alluding to the long-running theme throughout Kendrick Lamar's discography that he has these two polar opposite sides to him, usually attributed to the fact that he is a Gemini. This bar in particular always makes me think of his 2016 What's Wrong feature with Isaiah Rashad. The next bar is the flat-out call to a challenge.
Okay, let's get it up. It's time for him to prove that he's a problem.
And that he's willing to crash out over this. That's Kendrick saying, if you want a real challenge, come and step to me. And he's clearly assured and confident in his own abilities that he would have no issue winning this battle. I think Kendrick's tactic on this one is to get under Drake's skin. He knows, and we know, that Drake is a numbers-focused artist. By saying Prince outlived Mike Jack, Kendrick is shifting the lens of the beef by stating he does not give a fuck who's selling more. Projecting himself onto Prince like this shows what Kendrick sees himself as. The artist more versatile, artistically diverse, and flat-out talented than the pop juggernaut. And it's kind of a genius move to kick this off with, as opposed to flat-out name-calling or insults. At this point, I genuinely believe that Kendrick wants to see what his opponent is made of. J. Cole is actually the first to respond instead of Drake on his surprise Might Delete Later mixtape, an ironic name now for obvious reasons. From the jump, this felt lame and uninspired. J. Cole claimed that To Pimp a Butterfly put niggas to sleep. I don't even think J. Cole ever believed that for a moment, let alone his fans. He also attacks Kendrick for the time it takes him to drop music, as well as disregarding his Grammy achievements and telling him that he's effectively fallen off. Within 2 days at his Dreamville festival, J. Cole publicly apologized and admitted that the song was a huge misstep for him.
It's one part of that shit that make me feel like, man, that's the lamest shit I ever did in my fucking life, right? Trying to find a little angle and downplay this nigga's fucking catalog and his greatness, I want to say right now tonight, how many people think Kendrick Lamar is one of the greatest motherfuckers to ever touch a fucking microphone?
Now, at the time, and it wasn't even that long ago in the grand scheme of things, but it feels like a lifetime ago, J. Cole was being clowned by all corners of the internet for his apology. I myself thought it was a pretty weak move for a rapper who claims to be part of this so-called Big Three, and immediately backed out of what would be the biggest rap feud of this and maybe any preceding generation. In hindsight, most people agree that J. Cole not only dodged a bullet, but an entire fucking nuke. Word on the street is that he was maybe warned by Schoolboy Q of what was to come, and I believe most people would have done the same as J. Cole. I know for sure I would have. Cole can now basically never again call himself the GOAT or part of this Big Three, and I think that's a pretty small price to pay to avoid what was to come in a matter of weeks. In April, a leak of a supposed Drake response track called Push-Ups appears online. Immediately, there was speculation whether this was created with AI or not, which for me was already a red flag. A signifier that Drake's recent output had become so homogenous that it was hard to differentiate between himself and AI. We soon had confirmation that this was indeed a genuine track once it was officially uploaded on April 19th. Scatterbrained in nature, Push-Ups is primarily a response to Like That, although a variety of stars are hit with strays, including Rick Ross, The Weeknd, and even the basketballer Ja Morant. As it pertains to Kendrick Lamar himself, the disses were okay, I guess.
Like a label, boy, you in a scope right now, and you gon' feel the aftermath of what I write down.
The track itself is your standard run-of-the-mill mid-tempo Drake trap-style song, with the shots at Kendrick attacking his height, his shoe size, and his record deal, or previous record deal with TDE. Admittedly with some funny bars, particularly
Metro, shut your whole ass up and make some drums, nigga.
This is the point where Drake, unfortunately for him, makes the exact same mistake he made on Dappy Freestyle 6 years ago. Drake name drops Kendrick's long-term partner Whitney Alford with the bar,
I be with some bodyguards like Whitney. Top say drop your little midget ass, better fucking, hey, better drop and give me 50.
Aside from this, the disses at Kendrick remain directed at him, although not particularly scathing. You're short with small feet is kind of the main sentiment here. It was clear that Drake clearly wanted the smoke. There were even billboards that had been put up in promotion of this song and the competition between the two. That competition would, however, spiral into total fucking madness the next day with a quick-fire second release from Drake. This is where shit got really strange for me. Drake self-releases this song in a clear attempt to get Kendrick to respond to him as quickly as possible. The gimmick, however, is that the first two verses are from the perspective of West Coast legends Tupac and Snoop Dogg with the help of AI filters. Its title alludes to Drake's hypothesis that Kendrick was scared to drop because Taylor Swift's Tortured Poets Department album would impact his numbers, as well as Drake's mockery of Kendrick collaborating with Taylor Swift on Bad Blood. It's worth noting that this is the point for me that Drake is already spiraling. Consider the fact that Drake himself had an entire Apple Music promo campaign miming to Taylor Swift songs, alongside the fact that he's collaborated with some of the poppiest stars of our generation. He was literally in the Justin Bieber Baby music video. I don't think there's anything really wrong with either Drake or Kendrick working with, you know, whoever they want to work with, as long as they fuck with that artist. But it's the fact that he's attacking Kendrick for something he's done himself. Even fucking stranger, he raps from the perspective of Tupac speaking to Kendrick, and if you've listened to Kendrick Lamar's music, you'll know the significance Tupac has to his career. He says,
call him a bitch for me, talk about him liking young girls, that's a kid for me. Heard it on the Buddin' podcast, it's gotta be true.
This is important as it becomes a major focus of the disses later down the line. It's crucial to remember that throughout this beef, this is the very first time anyone mentions on record anything to do with Drake's relationship to young women or girls. As if he's trying to 8 Mile Kendrick and say everything he can before he gets to say it.
I know everything he's got to say against me. I am white. I am a fucking punk. I do live in a trailer with my mom.
But if you're in a position where you need to get ahead of something like that, you're already on the back foot before your opponent even says anything. He's clearly either underestimating or not understanding Kendrick's process. Drake mocks Kendrick for taking too long to drop, and again, keep in mind, this is after it took Drake a month to respond to like that. In the third verse, he brags that push-ups only took him an hour or two. I would argue, and I don't think this is an outlandish claim, that if you're facing Kendrick fucking Lamar, you should probably put some time and effort into strategy and writing if you want to stand a chance. Everyone in the industry knows Kendrick works at his own pace regardless of outside noise or pressure. Drake was soon handed a cease and desist from the Tupac estate, and he had to take the song down, rightfully so, after desecrating the memory of one of hip-hop's most important figures. It wasn't a move that sat well within hip-hop circles, but if there was ever an example of poking the bear, this was fucking it. Everyone knows the impact that Tupac had on Kendrick's career and life, and coupling the total disrespect with mentioning his wife and telling him that he should go on record to say he likes young girls was never going to end well for Drake. I, as a self-admitted Kendrick Lamar stan, knew that Drake was about to receive the smoke. I did not, however, envision it going down the path it did. A feeling of well-being or elation. Kendrick Boogeyman Lamar finally clapped back on a late April Tuesday with his official response. The title was heavily speculated to be a reference to the show of the same name, which Drake serves as an executive producer on. It's worth noting that the show Euphoria revolves around teenage hedonism and sexual conquests. Kendrick came out swinging from a variety of angles, immediately having people dissecting every bar word for hidden meanings or double entendres. When in reality, the most scathing disses scattered around Euphoria were probably the simplest.
I even hate when you say the word nigga, but that's just me, I guess. Some shit just cringeworthy. Ain't even gotta be deep, I guess.
Considering Kendrick refers to the state of the beef at this point in time as a friendly fade,
we ain't gotta get personal, this a friendly fade, you should keep it that way.
I was left wondering how exactly Kendrick considered a 6.5-minute opus attacking Drake's racial insecurities, artistic integrity, and flat out saying I hate you to be friendly. Within a few short days, Euphoria proved to be a prelude or a warning of what was to come. And Kendrick's strategy here is to put the ball in Drake's court.
If you take it there, I'm taking it further. Psst, that's something you don't want to do.
Could not be more crystal clear. That's the explicit warning. Drake has mentioned Kendrick's partner by name, so he responds with a track displaying his box of tricks to hit Drake from a variety of angles and hammering home the point that he will get dirty if he's pushed. More importantly, and in hindsight as well, Kendrick lays down the foundation and through line that will continue throughout his week-long dismantling of Drake. He calls him a master manipulator, he tells him he can predict all of his angles, and even states that Drake will fabricate stories about his family because he heard Mr. Morale. Once again, the shadow of that album continues to loom large over this beef. As an aside, it's easy to skim over the musicality of these tracks, and on Euphoria, Kendrick employs a number of flows, cadences, voices, and instantly memorable nuances that stick.
Cut the business, you got shit twisted. What is it, the breaks?
It's got two beat switches that vary in tempo and never pause for a moment. Witty double entendres about AI, the Sixth Sense, and Drake's supposed surgical enhancements. A line that sticks with me personally is,
have you ever watched your enemy down like with a poker face?
For the mere fact that it seems like a microcosm of Kendrick's strategy with his releases. Working from the shadows in silent with a poker face, unfazed by Drake's social media antics. Everything in this song works better in retrospect. The entire section reprimanding Drake for not knowing anything about effective fatherhood pays off in unimaginable ways on Meet the Grahams. It's that balancing act of teetering on the edge that Kendrick clearly knows Drake wants to push himself over. Whilst it is a scathing diss, it just about remains within the paradigms of standard rap beef territory. At this point, everyone is expecting Drake to respond swiftly, and he does so within 3 days. But it's still not quick enough to stop Kendrick going back to back and issuing a final warning. A reference, of course, to Drake's signature timestamp songs like 4 p.m. in Calabasas or 6 p.m. in New York. 616 in LA is considerably more soulful, straight-faced, and intimidating than Euphoria. Built around a prominent Al Green sample, 616 fulfills Kendrick's back-to-back tease 3 days prior on Euphoria. Little did we know that within the next 48 hours, he would do it again. Before getting into lyrics, it's worth noting that this, like tailor-made Freestyle, is not available on DSPs. Some have speculated that it may be a sample clearance issue, which I would lend some credence to if it wasn't for the fact that Kendrick Lamar has managed to clear Marvin Gaye samples in the past. As the final warning shot before the commencing battle, I feel that uploading this to Instagram of all places is intentional. We all know that Kendrick basically doesn't even fucking use Instagram. Kendrick is invading Drake's realm, one that Kendrick never steps foot in but knows that Drake is a hyperactive user of. Hardly a single day goes by without a new Champagne Pappy post, until this beef of course. That hypothesis lends itself to the content of 616, with Kendrick making the audacious and menacing implication that some of Drake's closest confidants are actually moles feeding Kendrick information about Drake's secrets.
Are you finally ready to play? Have you ever, let's see, have you ever thought that OVO is working for me?
The style and ethos of the song is a clear, intentional contrast to Euphoria. It's lyrically dense, soulful, and vintage. A hip-hop purist dream, so to speak. It's a beat that the likes of Freddie Gibbs or Boldy James or Absol would fit perfectly on. Because this is the only one of Kendrick's diss songs not available on streaming, I think how scathing the song is actually overlooked, especially in the aftermath. He alleges that Drake put money in the streets in an attempt to dig up dirt on Kendrick, something that has been alluded to by Pusha T of all people.
I tweeted out, 100 grand ain't enough to...
Information.
Yeah. For information.
You're looking for
that
something.
Shit was real. That shit was real. That was not fake. Me in the car, get a call from a old friend from LA. Yo, somebody just hit me up talking about 100 grand, you know, for information on you, so on and so forth.
Kendrick says that Drake can't Tootsie Slide up out of this one, in reference to his COVID era #1 song of the same name, embedding the idea what Kendrick is preparing for cannot be circumnavigated by a cheap novelty song. What I'll end on with 616 is that if Euphoria is the warning shot, 616 is Kendrick Lamar disappointingly shaking his head knowing that his warning is about to go unheeded, loading his gun for what he knows is about to come. The night of May 3rd will go down in history as one of the most fucking batshit insane moments in hip-hop ever. 616 had just dropped and everyone was on tenterhooks awaiting Drake's response, especially after goading Kendrick into his responses so aggressively. Family Matters drops, alongside a music video where Drake crushes a replica model of the van made famous on the deluxe cover of Good Kid, My Best to Do So. A retaliation mainly to Euphoria, Family Matters also has 3 distinct sections where Drake attempts to attack from a range of angles. Now it does stand to reason that Drake was probably sitting on this song for a while, considering the first section of the song uses the same hook and beat from the end of Push Ups. I'm of the belief that this was the so-called red button that Drake believed would end this beef, complete with scathing allegations and an entire music video. Musically, I do think this is the most locked in Drake has sounded in a while, particularly on the 3rd verse with that flow I cannot get out of my head. And the final beat is just ridiculous, particularly that sample. Unfortunately, Drake's performance and that final beat is wasted on some really scatterbrained and unfocused disses. I think the wheels started to falter in the very first verse.
Out here begging for attention, nigga, say please. Always rapping like you
theorizing that Day 3, Kendrick's longtime creative partner, might be the actual father of one of Kendrick's children. This diss falls flat for a couple of reasons. First being, it's not a bombshell at all. The wording itself tells us that Drake has either made it up himself or heard it from a random social media account. I heard that one of those kids might be like the bar was written by a lawyer intent on not being sued for slander. Secondly, even if we run with the idea that it was true, it still falls flat. I'd argue that sympathy would lie maybe with the person who's fathering a child unknown not to be his. It's not a particularly strong point of attack, which is why I think Kendrick not once bothers to even address it. We soon move into the section of the song where Drake raps over a drill beat while trying his best to respond to as many people as possible who's thrown shots his way. Now, it may be admirable to take on all comers at once, so to speak, but personally, if I was in a beef with, and I repeat it, Kendrick fucking Lamar, I'd probably focus my attention just on him. Realistically, no one's listening to Family Matters to hear what Drake has to say about The Weeknd or A$AP Rocky or Metro Boomin. Admittedly, some of the bars are quite funny, particularly the A$AP Rocky ones, but it's not necessary. To rate that, I think Drake is putting up a decent fight on most fronts. Flow-wise, beat selection, just riding a beat, it's all there. But at the end of the day, you're embroiled in the most high-profile rap beef of a generation, so you cannot skimp on the lyrics, and they just ain't there. I think one of the lamest non-Kendrick disses aimed at The Weeknd.
Tears running down my cheek, laughing at you pussy dying, it's a war cry. Weekend music getting played in all the spots where boys got a little more pride.
I'm not going crazy, but that's just an overtly homophobic bar that no one seems to bring up. The fundamental diss is as follows when you break it down. Abel, only gay people like your music and that's worthy of ridicule. Again, lame on a couple of levels. One, The Weeknd is legitimately one of the biggest pop stars on earth and is doing stadium tours that can only really be topped numbers-wise by Taylor Swift and Ed Sheeran. Two, it's just flat out homophobic and artifacts they've captured.
You right about fuck the big three. It's only Big D and it's video proof.
Is a fucking weird bar. It's weird. It's just weird. Of course, a reference to that leaked video, which Drake seems to be confirming is true here, of Drake on a plane with his out. Now, I think being on my private jet as a nearly 40-year-old man who happens to be an A-list celebrity, I probably wouldn't do that on camera. I just really don't think leaking your own videos of slapping your is the flex Drake really thinks it is. The following bars about Drake insinuating that because Kendrick makes it a point in his music to speak up about issues concerning black people in America and remains proud to do so, that Kendrick is somehow overcompensating or forcing his blackness. Which to me sounds like a projection. It's the kind of bar that if it came from Eminem, for example, we would just flat out call it racist. Now we get into the section of the song where Drake believes he's finished Kendrick for good. He speaks on how Kendrick proposed in 2015 and hasn't made Whitney his actual wife yet, then says the reason for that is Kendrick's infidelity and that his darkest secrets are coming to light. This is where euphoria becomes prophetic. Kendrick said Drake will fabricate stories on the family front because you heard Mr. Morale. Now, if you heard Mr. Morale, you'll know that not only did Kendrick explicitly discuss his infidelity, he specifically called out the types of people it was with and what period it was in his life.
Next time I fucked a white bitch was out in Copenhagen. Good kid, Mad City tour. I flourished on them stages. When he asked did I have a problem, I said I might be racist.
This is no secret, but Drake is relying on the fact that most of his audience probably hasn't heard Worldwide Steppers or Mother I Sober, where Kendrick addresses this. To the NPC, this sounds like a bombshell, of course, but to anyone who actually likes and listens to rap, this is a okay moment. He then goes on to admonish Kendrick for doing pop features for change and to rap for the whites. Clearly a reference to Kendrick's run of pop features between 2015 and 2017, where he did songs with the likes of Taylor Swift, Sia, and Maroon 5, none of which I think are particularly good songs. Now again, the diss falls flat because it's coming from Drake, the most pop, commercially viable, numbers-focused artist in the music industry. The end of the song is where Drake drops his giant allegation that he thinks will be historians, that if they were true, we would never look at Kendrick Lamar the same way ever again. Now, if that is true, then of course, that's a morally reprehensible thing to do. But we have zero reason to believe it might be true other from the fact that Drake himself said it. There is no track record of any kind, or even anything to speak to the character of Kendrick Lamar, as far as we know, doing anything of the sort. And of course, in the following days, Kendrick's would-be brother-in-law was tweeting in complete support of Kendrick Lamar himself against Drake. Now, I know that isn't proof, as if you could prove a negative anyway, but personally, if my sister's abuser was dropping diss songs, I probably wouldn't be on his side. And that's where the song ends. And again, I'm inclined to believe that Drake thought this would be the knockout blow. And in 99.9% of circumstances, this would be. This is where I sound like a broken record. Kendrick fucking Lamar isn't most rappers. 30 minutes. Kendrick Lamar did not allow even 30 minutes of room for Family Matters to breathe before he head stomped it. By the time reactors were just about finishing up recording their Family Matters reactions, Meet the Grahams dropped on our heads. The cover art alone was sinister, with Kendrick revealing the full picture that was initially cropped on the 616 artwork earlier that day, seemingly confirming his allegation that he does have insiders in Drake's camp leaking information to him. The artwork depicts a variety of items supposedly belonging to Drake, including a prescription of Ozempic and a jewelry store receipt. As an aside, I'm not going to go into all the Ebony Prince 2K24 shit from Twitter. I'm sure there's extensive videos about that out there. Considering the fact that Kendrick had Meet the Grahams ready to drop immediately, it leads me to believe that Kendrick may have heard Family Matters before it dropped, or at the bare minimum was aware of the content of the diss. Now, I do want to talk about the beat briefly just before we get to its lyrical content. The Alchemist is maybe my favorite hip-hop producer ever, and is a certified hip-hop legend. It means even more that he himself is also an LA native like Kendrick. They've linked up together before on songs like Fear and We Cry Together, but this beat is singular in how downright fucking scary it is. The only Alchemist beat that comes close to how much this sounds like a horror film is maybe Scrape the Bowl from The Price of Tea in China. Dissonant, detuned, descending pianos, otherworldly vocal chops set the soundscape for Kendrick Lamar's family therapy session. Structured as a letter to Drake's son, mother, father, alleged hidden daughter, and then eventually Drake himself, Kendrick uses the lessons he learned from Mr. Morale for a diabolical purpose. The song's very first lyric is,
Dear Adonis, I'm sorry that man is your father, let me be honest.
It's the headline grammar that stopped everyone in their tracks, and immediately we knew that this was something different. Kendrick chose the psychological warfare angle and used it for the ultimate disrespect. He has sat Drake's child down for a pep talk and to drive home harsh truths about how awful of a person his father is.
Sometimes our parents make mistakes that affect us until we grown. Hey, you're a good kid that need good leadership. Let me be your mentor since your daddy don't teach you shit.
That's a lyric and theme with Mr. Morale written all over it. The reason it hits is because we've heard the story of Father Time, where Kendrick expresses the damaging, toxic traits handed down from fathers to their son. And in a twisted supervillain kind of way, it feels like Kendrick sincerely cares about the well-being of his enemy's offspring. It's like he's saying, your dad is a lost cause, but I can save you before you end up the same way. We get some scathing bars about the years-old allegation of Drake being pissed on, how Kendrick wishes Dennis Graham wore a condom, and how Kendrick wants to be a mentor figure for Adonis. A key bar for me is Kendrick telling Adonis,
never code switch, whether right or wrong. You're a black man, even if it don't benefit your goals.
This to me confirms, as if it wasn't already fucking obvious, that Kendrick is not attacking Drake for the simple fact that he is biracial. He's attacking him for what he believes is a co-optive, convenient relationship with his own blackness. And the fact that he validates his son's blackness shows that Kendrick does not see this relationship as solely reliant on the pigment of your skin, as is evidenced by the fact that Adonis is clearly much fairer skinned than Drake himself. The verse ends with Kendrick reassuring Adonis that he has a bright future ahead of him and will go on to do great things by virtue of his claim that he is nothing like Drake. That is ultimate fucking disrespect. The next verse is where things go beyond nuclear. Kendrick aligns himself with Drake's mother, empathizing having to stand next to seemingly awful men. It's apologetic in tone, with Kendrick accusing Dennis and Drake of disrespecting Sandra. He goes on to address Dennis directly, telling him flat out that you raised a horrible fucking person, and blames him for it. In truly theatrical nature, Kendrick turns back to Sandra to address her directly and provide the heavy truths about what her son is doing.
Your son's a sick man with sick thoughts. I think niggas like him should die.
He goes on to allege that Drake hates black women because of how he hypersexualizes them. Now, this bar lines up with the bar about Drake sleeping with women of many races in Family Matters, of course. You could infer that from Drake's point of view, he couldn't possibly hate black women because he likes to have sex with them, which is, in my opinion, clearly misogynistic. The allegation that holds particular weight is Kendrick claiming that Drake keeps sex offenders on OVO and continues to pay them. This is a reference to Baka Not Nice, and not the last reference to him, who's one of Drake's closest OVO associates. I'll read this verbatim just so I don't get any of the information wrong, but in 2014, Baka was arrested and charged with forcing a 22-year-old woman into prostitution and taking her money. In 2015, he pled guilty to assaulting the woman and an unrelated weapons charge. Now, in reference to this case, he did not go to prison on the trafficking charge, but on the assault and weapons charge. So to make it clear, he was charged with forcing a woman into prostitution, but not sentenced for it. Those charges were dropped after the woman declined to testify. Regardless, if I was Drake, I probably wouldn't want to associate myself with someone who is clearly not nice. When Baka was released from prison, Drake welcomed him back into his camp. He'd already been a part of Drake's security team before and had contributed some random background vocals on a couple of songs. Now, personally, I probably wouldn't welcome back and declare it a holiday as soon as he got back on the road. Someone like this, which legitimately makes people question why Drake would do this.
I might declare it a holiday as soon as Baka get back on the road.
Kendrick, of course, takes it a step further to allege that Drake is knowingly employing sex offenders for nefarious purposes, which, again, I have to state, is an allegation. However, because of the track record of Drake's associates and himself with, I'll say, women of a particular age, it holds credence and weight to the audience. Enough so for public perception of Drake to significantly shift, regardless of if any formal charges are ever pressed. Kendrick continues his critique by chastising Drake for daring to keep his children anywhere near these people, and flat calls him a predator and says once again that he should die. We're relatively removed from this moment, but I cannot get over how much of a watershed moment this is in rap history. The man deemed to be the greatest rapper of his generation is telling the most commercially successful rapper of his generation that he should die because he is a sex offender like Harvey Weinstein. This isn't fucking normal. Kendrick goes on to strongly imply that Drake is somehow involved in a sex trafficking ring and reframes Drake's flex about his Big D video as a way to push his own agenda.
They be streamlining victims all inside of their home and calling them tender. Then leak videos of themselves to further push their agendas.
And this is one of the prime examples of what I believe Kendrick is attempting to do, is to take Drake's own antics, filter them through an entirely new lens, and force the public to view him in a new light. Regardless of whether these are true or exaggerations of Drake's character, because of Drake's weird track record with women, you can't help but just think, that's a bit weird. It's a natural human response. And to do that to literally the biggest artist in the game is not a small feat. Verse 3 is where the internet went into overdrive, of course, where Kendrick states that Drake has another hidden child in the shape of an 11-year-old daughter. Kendrick is using the perception of Drake he has pushed throughout the song and makes it believable that someone like Drake, who constantly boasts about how many random women he sleeps with, may have a daughter out there that he doesn't know about. The story is immediately compelling, so much so that it hits without the concrete evidence. The perception change is the damage itself, not the receipts or lack thereof. It's evident, of course, that if there were irrefutable proof that Drake did not have a daughter, then this completely falls flat. But once again, like on Family Matters, this would require proving a negative, which is downright impossible, and that's what protects the impact of the bars. He goes on to flat out call Drake a misogynist that doesn't commit to anything aside from his music.
He don't commit to much but his music, yeah, that's for sure. He a narcissist, misogynist, living inside his songs.
Completely recontextualizing this particular bar from Shot For Me, which was on Take Care.
Okay, look, I'm honest. Girl, I can't lie, I miss you. You and the music were the only things that I commit to.
Mr. Morale once again permeates the theme of the song, being explicitly referenced here with Kendrick claiming that fathers like Drake is the reason he had to make Mr. Morale, a call to action to break generational curses handed down from parents. Like the first verse, Kendrick assumes the role of the person who knows the best advice for this unnamed daughter, because he himself had to work through the exact same issues on his album. The final verse is directed at Drake, and he confirms what we had already suspected. The reason Kendrick is hell-bent on dissecting Drake's character is because he called out Kendrick's family members unprompted. The exact same mistake he made with Pusha T.
It's supposed to be a good exhibition within the game, but you fucked up the moment you called out my family's name.
He goes on once again to use publicly available information to reframe Drake's social media image. He says he has gambling and addiction problems, spending problems, and soliciting women problems. I think the most underrated bar in this entire beef is in this verse.
Let's recap moments when you didn't fit in. No secret handshakes with your friend. No culture cachet to binge.
That's ridiculous for a few reasons. It's the payoff to Kendrick's claim on Euphoria that he is what the culture is feeling and Drake isn't. His indictment is that Drake has no original voice or strong identity, stemming from his childhood insecurities that he is now overcompensating for in his adult life. Additionally, that culture cachet bar pays off again with just the entire existence of Not Like Us later down the line. Kendrick says that he wants Drake to shed his mask, take away his facade, and see what's truly under the surface. He wants him to take off the foo-foo, so to speak. The line is particularly chilling to me considering what appears to be lurking under that mask by the time we get to the Heart Part 6. He closes the song with a barrage of things he accuses Drake of lying about: his son, his supposed daughter, his ghostwriters, his surgery, and Kendrick himself. The ending is a confirmation of what is evidently true. Kendrick sees this as bigger than rap. He seems genuinely disgusted by the idea of someone like Drake existing in this space. And to me, that ended the beef. It was over, it was done. Fuck a rap battle, this a long life battle with yourself appeared to be the mic drop from which Drake could not recover from. And not even a full day later, Kendrick doubles down on Drake with the indisputable song of the fucking summer.
Psst, I see dead people.
Until the day I die, I will never forget where I was the moment I first heard this song. I'll quickly show you the sample for this shit because it's simple but it's ridiculous. Kendrick makes it clear immediately that this song is by and for his people, particularly the people of Compton. I do believe, as many do, that the song is universal, but I think that's the main thesis. In the first couple of bars, we have references to Debo from Friday, Another Mustard on the Beat Ho, and Amber Lamps.
What's up with these jabroni ass niggas trying to see Compton?
There's a stark contrast in approach to pure bars and punchlines here already too. Kendrick says,
I'm finna pass on this body, I'm John Stockton.
A bar that isn't explained any further because Kendrick either expects you to know who John Stockton is or find out for yourself. Put this next to Drake's bars on Family Matters about Day 3 where he has to explain the punchline to his audience. The difference in approach is so clear. Drake is attempting to appeal to the widest possible audience while Kendrick is making something genuine and authentic. The irony is that Not Like Us is the most quote-unquote Compton West Coast song Kendrick may ever make and may actually end up as his biggest ever hit. We get just flat out savage bars further down the line like beat your ass and had the Bible of God watching. It doesn't need further explanation, it's just a crazy hard bar. Kendrick continues to link the song back to his previous disses, showing us that this was in fact a strategy carefully.
Have you ever watched your enemy down like with a poker face?
From Euphoria are bookends to Kendrick's whole strategy. He's been walking Drake down, so to speak, and the whole time he has his number. His poker face is his mystique and refusal to engage with Drake or anyone else publicly other than through the medium of his music alone. After this section is where we get the set of bars that sent the internet alight again. That hits for a variety of reasons. One, there is unfortunately well-documented evidence of Drake having strange encounters with particularly young women. I need to choose my words carefully.
Jay-Z, I know you got killers. Please don't send them at my head.
2, Drake himself has extremely questionable lyrics and bars throughout his career, i.e. the entirety of Jaded.
I wasn't rushing, difference in ages. You're old enough, but you're still a baby.
By virtue of the fact that this bar is capitalizing on a kind of unspoken accepted facet of Drake's public persona, it carries weight and it hits. It hits in a way that if the roles were reversed, it just wouldn't hit. It would just sound like an outlandish thing to say. Kendrick doubles down again and flat out calls Drake and his associates pedophiles. Now, this was a running joke that me and my friends had right at the start of the beef. Hand on heart, I jokingly made the prediction that Kendrick would call Drake a PDF file. Meet the Grahams dropped and he basically said it and I already felt vindicated. But never in my wildest fucking dreams did I envision Kendrick Lamar Duckworth calling Aubrey Drake Graham a pedophile on a DJ Mustard beat. I do feel like I need to hammer home this point because the dust has now settled, but this is a bizarre moment in popular culture. 2024 is always going to be the year that Kendrick dropped this song and dropped that A minor bar. The second verse is a bit more varied than the first and third in terms of targets, with Kendrick lambasting Drake for speaking on Serena Williams' name and fucking Lil Wayne's girl while he was in prison and getting his face tatted. Most telling of all, Kendrick tells us that the rabbit hole goes deeper and that he has 5 more songs in stock. Considering how well planned Kendrick's strategy has been, I'm of the belief that he probably did have more in the chamber, ready to rebut basically anything Drake could have possibly said. Not Like Us' third verse, to me, is the most scathing and most important passage in the entire beef, including all the crazy shit on Meet the Grahams and the discombobulation of Euphoria and the absol energy of 616. The final verse of Not Like Us rubber stamps that this is the synthesized version of Kendrick's entire artistic core. It's like here we really learn why Kendrick fundamentally has an issue with not only Drake, but the idea of Drake and what he believes he represents. Kendrick makes reference to the bar from Family Matters where Drake attempted to clown on Kendrick for trying to free the slaves. Uses the position Drake places himself in to brutal effect, immediately framing Drake as a colonial type figure in hip hop, hopping on popular black artists' hype and extracting capital from them. He compares Atlanta during the slave trade and Atlanta now, And for the last 10 to 15 years, Atlanta has been the most important city in the US for hip hop. Kendrick's hypothesis is that Drake has no interest in connecting or helping the artists and people of Atlanta, rather just to use them for his own financial gain. He goes on to list a litany of Atlanta artists Drake has worked with, including 21 Savage, Young Thug and Future, and makes the claim that Drake is a master culture vulture. Of course, this claim has been levied at Drake before within smaller hip-hop circles, but for casual listeners of hip-hop who will hear this song, it forces them to reevaluate. The marketing genius of Drake is the spin he's been able to pull off in regards to working with other artists, and I will admit that when I was younger, I fell for the spin many times. If this was 2015 or 2016, I would have been one of those people claiming that Drake put 21 Savage on because the first time I heard him was on Sneaking. But I'm sure if you asked anyone from Atlanta around the time, they'll tell you that 21 was popping off well before Drake came along. The same goes for the Migos and the Versace remix. All of these were artists that were already blowing up before Drake came along and claimed the assist, so to speak. Now, this isn't to discredit some of the music along the way, because I fuck with a lot of the music Drake made with these artists. But it's the relationship with black culture Drake seems to have that clearly bothers Kendrick. Even lines like, "I associate myself as a black man" on the Rap Radar interview, diplomatic immunity clearly signaled towards Drake's identity issues as well.
Black excellence, but I guess when it comes to me, it's not the same, no.
There's a clear chip on his shoulder, which Pusha T had already dissected. And if there's any hostility towards Drake from the black community, maybe he should look at himself and ask why. Why is it that a few years into his career, he adopted a whole new lingo and invented a new gangster persona? Even in that 2019 Rap Radar interview, Drake dismissed the claims of being a culture vulture and implies that he is being accused of that because he's not black enough.
But that line is just me speaking to the other side of things, which is like, yo, sometimes like, you know, some of like my blackest friends can be just as cruel on the other end. You know, by making you feel excluded, you know, and I associate I associate myself as a black man. So for me, it's sometimes it's something that I just acknowledge and I just keep it moving. But
I bring it back to J. Cole, who has never had a claim like that made against him, even if he is biracial like Drake, because his relationship to music and black culture appears to be very different. This is the reason why someone like The Alchemist, for example, is one of the most respected figures in hip-hop, despite the fact that he's a middle-class white man from Beverly Hills. What makes The Alchemist hip-hop isn't the color of his skin, it's his authenticity and talent. The verse and this analysis of it begs the question, what is Drake's unique sound? Because we've heard him do watered-down versions of dancehall, of grime, of drill and trap, and so many more. But what is his sound, that cultural cachet that Kendrick mentioned? The closest answer I can think of is the Take Care early 2010s watery, moody R&B sound, which I must reiterate I love and grew up on. A lot of the other things Drake has attempted seem to be pale imitations of sounds done much better. I remember when One Dance dropped in the UK, that the Kyler song back in 2008-2009 was a big deal in London, and it's a song I grew up on. And what One Dance did to that song is a fucking crime. I can also point to Drake tapping into the UK drill sound at a point. UK drill at the time of making this video is experiencing a bit of a downward trend in the UK, but for a good 5 or so years, it was the popping subgenre of rap here. Drake's attempts with songs like War and his collabs with Heady One are the most watered down, palatable versions of drill, like a curry with no kick. I feel like I've gone off the track here a bit, but it speaks to the bigger idea that Kendrick is trying to get at. This is bigger than rap, and the chorus alone speaks to that. I'm not speaking in hyperbole when I say They Not Like Us could be as impactful as We Gon' Be Alright. A simple 4-word refrain that stretches beyond the bounds of hip-hop. It's a rally cry against culture vultures, against those who view blackness as something to dip their toes into when it's convenient, whilst functioning as an overt love letter to the place Kendrick hails from. I haven't even mentioned how fucking hilarious this song is too. And I think because of Kendrick's mysterious public persona, people forget that his sense of humor is there as well.
Freaky ass nigga, he a 69 God. Freaky ass nigga, he a 69 God.
Coming from the same man who wrote Meet the Grahams is diabolical. Some bars don't need explaining, it's just some funny shit. Kendrick even makes sure to end the song with a whole dance number for the kids on TikTok to get involved with. The song ends, and after one listen, I knew this was going to be the song of the summer and one of the biggest songs of the year. Now, considering Meet the Grahams and this dropped within the space of 24 hours, everyone was expecting a swift response from Drake. We got that the following day, and it revealed what was under that mask Kendrick claimed Drake was wearing. And it wasn't fucking pretty. The Heart Part 6 is without a doubt one of the worst fucking diss songs I've ever heard. Not because of the flows or delivery or the beat, which is actually fire, but purely from a lyrical standpoint. The title is of course a reference to Kendrick's long-running Heart series of songs that he releases in the run-up to new albums dropping. Drake uses more than 5 minutes to rap what literally sounds like a defense statement, resorting to 100% damage control before just giving up. I'm not going to go through every single terrible bar because there are just too many, but the key points that seem to confirm Kendrick's allegation that Drake is a master manipulator. The Heart Part 6 does more damage to Drake's reputation than basically anything Kendrick did himself. We're at a point that regardless of what allegations are true or not, the picture of Drake we're presented with on this song is that of a gaslighter. Off the bat, Drake claims that Kendrick is receiving information about Drake from clowns, and then a couple of bars later contradicts himself by claiming that he himself fed Kendrick false information. Make it make sense. The latter being a theory that had been floating around Twitter since Meet the Grahams dropped, mainly from Drake stans coping real hard. Drake attempts to convince us that he is this cartoon villain pulling the strings from the shadows. The thing is, personally, if I had a master plan, it probably wouldn't involve me letting the entire world call me a pedophile on the biggest song of the summer. Drake is clutching at straws here, regurgitating Twitter theories that he was feeding false information to Kendrick's camp about an 11-year-old daughter and the Meet the Grahams cover art. I just don't believe that's true, flat out. If it is true, would you have not documented you feeding Kendrick's camp false information and releasing that as soon as Meet the Grahams drops? Drake then goes on to question why Whitney, Kendrick's partner, hasn't denied the domestic violence allegations and why she is following Dave Free on Instagram and not Kendrick.
And then why isn't Whitney denying all of the allegations? Why is she following Dave Free and not Mr. Morale?
I know that sounds ridiculous coming from a 37-year-old man, but that is literally what he said. It's high school gossip shit and comes off incredibly immature. I remember being 16 and being concerned that so-and-so was following this person on Instagram or on Snapchat, but most people grow out of that shit when they hit adulthood. It confirms that Drake's image is kind of a fabrication that exists digitally. To him, if something is denied or confirmed online, that's gospel. In reality, everyone knows Kendrick is a pretty offline guy, and who the fuck cares about Instagram followers? I genuinely think Drake can't fathom validation existing offline. Then we get the really crazy shit. Drake says he was expecting the Epstein angle to come his way. I have to repeat this. Drake claims that he expected to be accused of being inappropriate with underage girls and somehow attempts to claim that as a W. He goes on to claim that Kendrick got these ideas from TikTok. The idea of Kendrick scrolling on TikTok is fucking hilarious, when in reality the picture of Drake being inappropriate around young women is one he himself painted. Then we get the most egregious part of the song where Drake is either fundamentally incapable of understanding Kendrick's lyrics or is once again trying to gaslight people. We have to break it down into several parts because it's so fucking insane. Drake says,
"My mom came over today and I was like, mother, wait a second. That's that one record where you say you got molested."
First off, factually untrue. In fact, Kendrick says the exact opposite. On Mother I Sober, Kendrick tells the story of his mother's abuse and trauma and how when he told his mother that he wasn't touched, he wasn't believed because of that residual generational trauma. Drake then goes on to use this false claim as the basis for his hypothesis. The reason Kendrick is obsessed with these PDF file raps is because he was touched as a child. It's crazy for a couple of reasons. Drake knows that the casual fan, or a lot of Drake stans, have probably never heard Mother I Sober. They'll take his word at face value and believe it to be true. 2, if what Drake said was true, I'd argue it's even worse. Then Drake believes that the only reason not to like PDF files is because you yourself are a victim. I don't think this is crazy, but I'd argue that someone being a PDF file alone warrants disdain from the jump. It's like Drake is attempting a hybrid story of Adidon and Meet the Grahams, but with nothing to go on, and is just firing blindly into a dark room. Drake raises the white flag by saying, "I don't want to dish you no more, this really got me second guessing," which is insane considering a couple of days ago he was begging Kendrick to drop. Now I did say the last part was the most egregious, but I lied. It's the next part.
just for clarity, I feel disgusted. I'm too respected. If I was fucking young girls, I promise I'd have been arrested. I'm way too famous for the shit you just suggested.
Drake claims he is too famous to be a sex offender. I feel like I'm still going crazy. He claimed he was too famous to be a sex offender and that if he was fucking young girls, he'd have been caught by now. I mean, you know, it's not like famous, rich, powerful people have ever gotten away for years with sex crimes. That's clearly never happened. This is what actually scares me. Kendrick said to us, take that mask off, I want to see what's under them achievements. And it's this. A person who literally thinks he's too famous to be a sex offender, despite a catalogue of rich and famous people being exactly that. If they're the most likely not to be arrested. Only fucking with Whitney's, not Millie Bobby Brown's, I'd never look twice at no teenager again is a what the fuck moment. Kendrick never mentioned Millie Bobby Brown once in this beef. Not once, or even made a reference to her. This confirms that Drake is responding to Twitter timelines, not Kendrick. It's the reason Kendrick didn't even attempt to rebut the Whitney abuse claim, because it's so ridiculous and unsubstantiated that it doesn't even deserve a response. Drake, with this bar, puts a magnifying glass on his friendship with Millie Bobby Brown once again, completely through his own doing. More white flags are raised throughout the song before he just gives up on rapping to provide the cringiest spoken word outro ever.
I'm not gonna lie, this shit was some good exercise. Like, it's good to get out, get the pen working. You would be a worthy competitor if I was really a predator.
That is funnier than anything Kendrick could possibly come up with. The reaction and backlash to the song was immediate. I was up listening to this in bed with my AirPods at 4 a.m. and I almost woke my partner from her slumber because I couldn't believe the shit I was hearing. Even the hardcore Drake stans were struggling to come up with some sort of a defense. But Kendrick cornered Drake so efficiently from all angles that within a couple of days, Drake was claiming he expected to be called a pedophile, so he wins. Bye, see you later. Everyone knew Kendrick needn't say anything further. He let Not Like Us snowball, and it debuted at number 1 on the Hot 100, whilst the Heart Part 6 never even touched DSPs. Within a few short days, Kendrick completed his mission. We know that Drake will be back at some point within a few months, dropping some mid-record that will spawn a flavorless number 1 single. What Kendrick did was separate Drake from what he thinks is the quote-unquote culture, and has basically made it kind of lame to listen to Drake in hip-hop circles, which I think is fucking crazy. So I'm recording this a couple of days out from the Ken and Friends pop-out show, where Kendrick debuted Not Like Us 5 times in a row and had Crips and Bloods dancing together and brought out fucking DJ Mustard and Roddy Ricch and Tyler Creator and Dr. Dre. This beef cements the difference between Kendrick and Drake, and Kendrick used the opportunity to make a point bigger than both artists are. It speaks to someone that genuinely cares about the art of hip-hop, and someone who sees it as an opportunity or a cash grab. Amidst the rapid-fire responses, allegations, misinformation, Kendrick used his platform and utilized Drake as a symbol of what happens to hip-hop when it becomes over-commodified. It becomes a product rather than an expression, a trend rather than art, which Kendrick clearly takes issue with. This will be remembered as one of the most insane periods in hip-hop history, but I think it could spark a re-evaluation of where hip-hop is going into the next few years with Kendrick as its figurehead. This beef will forever stain Drake's hip-hop credibility, and personally, I'm just happy I got to hear so much new Kendrick in such a short space of time. But I truly think we are yet to see the full scale of the repercussions of this, and I cannot wait to see where this takes hip-hop in the next few years. So as I'm recording this final bit, I've finally got around to watching the entirety of the pop-out Ken and Friends concert, and it does feel like, you know, a victory lap, a moment in hip-hop history, and confirming once again that Kendrick really does see, not only he sees this beef and himself as bigger than rap, and he's using his platform to, he's got gang members reuniting on stage. Like, this shit is fucking insane. I haven't written anything for this. I'm just going off just some thoughts I had about the concert. Of course, you know, I wish I could have witnessed it, but it looked like a beautiful thing. As I'm about to finish recording this as well, I've been seeing that there are rumors that he's in Compton right now filming a music video. By the time this video comes out, I'm sure the music video is probably already out, and I cannot wait to see what the fuck that looks like. And one thing I think is fucking hilarious is on Family Matters, Drake said, "You know who really banged a set? My nigga YG," and YG is just there on stage with Kendrick Lamar. Oh. But yeah, I'm really intrigued as to see how both artists may address this going forward. Drake has kind of been addressing it in some kind of, cryptic Instagram posts as he usually does. He's just back to his Champagne Pappy stuff. There's rumors that Kendrick is in the process of making a new album. It's such a big watershed moment that, they're going to be, the next time any of these guys do some sort of public appearance, they're going to be asked about this. And it's just going to be really interesting to see, what Kendrick says about it and how Drake tries to spin it into some sort of W, or just maybe just completely ignore it. But yeah, that's it. We out.